Nicknamed America's happiest murder defendant, the woman accused of killing her police officer boyfriend, Karen Reed, has lost her cool in court. New pictures show the moments she snapped at her legal team right as court was breaking for lunch. And it came moments after jurors heard emotional testimony from a witness. Now, Reed is facing second-degree murder charges for allegedly reversing her car into her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, and leaving him for dead back in 2022. So joining me now, trial attorney and legal analyst, Misty Marris. Misty, thank you so much for your time. So what advice should her legal team be giving her, and how important is a defendant's behavior in court?
Well, it doesn't seem like she's as happy as she usually is. She usually likes the media attention outside, but even that is something that your defense attorney will tell you it isn't really a great look. And especially when you're in that defense table and the jury is observing your behavior and your conduct. The reason is the jury is paying attention to everything. They are noticing so many details, especially when it comes to the defendant's demeanor. So the defense attorney is going to advise her, look, I understand this is emotional. I understand you might have an opinion about some of the testimony, but it's best for us to talk about that outside of the courtroom and not to have any reactions to that witness testimony when you're sitting at that table.
All right, so Misty, you mentioned demeanor here. So, as you alluded to, as we said at the top of this, she's been seen grinning at cameras, flashing a big wink, waving to supporters, waving to her lawyers. Is behavior in general, whether it's good or bad, is it enough to make or break a case?
It's so funny because leading up to this case, it seemed like she was really diving into the fame, I want to call it, being infamous to a certain extent. But the behavior absolutely does have an impact. And anything that happens inside the courtroom, the jury is going to see and be aware of. Now, what happens outside, that's more about the court of public opinion, because presumably the jurors have been instructed not to look at media coverage, not to look at anything outside of what the evidence shows in the courtroom. And so they wouldn't really know about that. But absolutely, the way that a defendant acts at that defense table can certainly tip the scales with the jury, because remember, they're hearing testimony from all sorts of other people. Will they hear from her? We don't know, but their only impression could just be her mannerisms and the way that she conducts herself, especially if she doesn't testify.
All right. So, Misty, the prosecutors are saying, she hit her boyfriend, ran over him, left him for dead. The defense is saying this is all a setup. She didn't do it. How important is the video evidence that's being presented in this case?
The video evidence is critically important, although it doesn't really show the critical moment of the case and exactly what happened to O'Keefe in this terrible tragedy. But really, this case comes down to the defense really almost shifting the burden of proof upon them. And I don't mean that in the legal sense, because of course the burden of proof is always on the prosecutors. The prosecutors are presenting a more simple case. And what do I mean by that? Well, a person who's involved in a relationship, who they're presenting testimony and information that it was an acrimonious relationship resulting in his death. The defense, on the other hand, is presenting a widespread conspiracy that basically indicates everybody in the police department, EMS. It's really, really complicated. And so when it comes down to that, the defense then almost puts the burden on themselves, not legally, but just in the jury's mind, to show how such an intricate thing could actually take place. So this case is actually quite complicated when you get down to the root of it. And I really think if she's convicted, it's going to be because she was intoxicated at the scene, and maybe she doesn't really know what happened. So there's a lot of different ins and outs of this case.
And you mentioned the fact that it's complicated. I mean, which side do you think has the heavier lift in this case? Is it the defense because of what they're saying happened or didn't happen?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the defense, of course, just has to raise reasonable doubt. And something they've been doing a really, really good job at thus far is actually poking holes in the veracity of the investigation, not even necessarily getting into the nitty-gritty of this conspiracy aspect, which they are intending to raise and will likely argue at closing arguments. But they've been saying that this investigation focused lasers on Karen Read immediately and didn't look at any other types of alternative scenarios, alternative perpetrators. And in doing so, they've gotten a couple of law enforcement agents to say that they didn't hear Karen Read said, "I hit him." Some of the critical evidence the prosecution presented, or that they did not see a broken taillight at the scene. Those are two big things for the prosecution. So they're poking holes in it in that way to show that, hey, maybe there's reasonable doubt here. And so when we say heavier lift, I think it's a complicated defense to raise, that it's a widespread conspiracy. You know, the simplest answer is oftentimes the one the jury will go with. By the same token, all they have to do is get one juror for a hung jury or raise reasonable doubt.
All right. We will see what happens. Misty, thank you.
Thank you.